Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Your Art is a Spell. I'm so excited that we are coming close to the end of season 1 of Your Art is a Spell. This is our first season, and I've been so happy with all of the amazing guests that we've had this season. And this is one of the last guests that we're going to be having on season 1, and I'm thrilled to share that today I'm going to be speaking with Uma Gahd, who is an incredible artist, drag queen, performer. Uma is also a witch who has a background in early childhood education. Uma is based in Montreal, but has shown her drag work all over the world. And not only that, but she was recently featured on Canada's Drag Race Season 5 as a contestant. I was rooting for her because I'm always rooting for the weirdo, underground, activist drag queens who end up on RuPaul's Drag Race. I am someone who loves seeing unconventional drag, and Uma is as contrarian and as unconventional as you get, and we will hear a little bit more about this in our conversation. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to share this amazing conversation that I'm about to have with Uma Gahd. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Your Art is a Spell. I'm so excited today to have the incredible drag queen performer Uma Gahd on today's episode. I'm so grateful to the witches at the Missing Witches podcast for connecting us, and just want to invite you in as everyone's favorite unofficial auntie. If you want to just let us know a little bit about you, Uma, how you're doing today.
I am doing really great. I am on the road today. I'm visiting a small city in Quebec for their Comic-Con. So we're out here on the road. I'm doing fabulous and just really happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast. We talk so much about art and magic on this podcast, and I'm so curious for you to share about your relationship to art and magic as someone who traverses those realms, as I've heard that you are also a little bit of a witch, along with also being an artist and performer.
Yeah, I've been kind of one of those kids that was always like a little bit artistic, as I say with a limp wrist.
Yeah.
So I've always been a little bit of an artist, and my dream was always just kind of to perform. I never knew what I was going to be doing, but my dream was to perform. I've been a witch since I was in the sixth grade. Basically, like any good Catholic girl, I did my confirmation and then converted immediately after.
I'm curious about that. Yeah, how were you led to that? Like, I'm curious how you stumbled upon witchcraft and that world.
So witchcraft itself was always kind of like an interest for me. I love the mystery and the magic of everything. I love the fantasy of it all. Well, and like I said, I did my sixth grade confirmation at Catholic school, and it was actually really funny because my godmother. So for those of you that don't know what a godmother does, a godmother's job is that if your parents if they die and they can no longer take care of you spiritually, it's her job to raise you properly, spiritually, religiously. And so for my confirmation, like any good godmother, after she stood in front of the church with me and said, "This is the kid that believes in the Trinity and the church and all that stuff," she then
Yeah.
handed me a book on Greek mythology. And it kind of took off from there because I was kind of like, oh, wait, there's options. There's things that I can do. I can try stuff. And that's kind of where it was. I met a couple people when I was younger that were into Wicca. I gave that a run for a while through high school up until I was in college, kind of. And then basically when I started going to a pagan festival that was around here up in Canada, it's called Kaleidoscope Gathering. I was there, and back then I had long curly hair. Now I shave my head because it's more fun in drag. But
Yeah.
uh, so I had long curly hair. I was wearing a flower crown, and all of these people kept comparing me to Dionysus. They were like, "Oh, you look like Bacchus. You look like Dionysus." And I thought it was really funny because actually at the time I was straight edge. So that meant that I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. I was a former raver, but I never did any, substances of any kind. And so the
Hmm.
idea of being associated with Dionysus, who is the Greek god of like partying and revelry and wine and drinking and chaos, it was almost like comical how opposite of me it was. But it just kept
Wow.
happening, like not even just at that festival, it just kept coming up in my life. And so at some point you kind of have to like when the universe is shouting at you, at some point you do have to listen. And so I started looking into that. So I started down the path of Hellenic. I say Hellenic revivalism because I'm not a Reconstructionist. I don't have the academic side in me to like do it 100% the right way. So I always say that I'm a revivalist. I'm like trying to wake up the tradition in the world as it exists now. And
Yeah.
on that path, I started to understand a little bit more of Dionysus's aspect as kind of like a gender queer weirdo outsider, and the aspects of his worship that were in theater and things like that really spoke to me as a kid who was always interested in theater. I was a trained dancer, and so the more I looked into it, the more it actually started to make sense, which was pretty wild. And then it was around that time
Mm.
that I started to I was in a production of Rocky Horror. I was playing Rocky, which another surprise for some people because they don't really see me as a Rocky type, but I did it. And that's kind of where I started my drag career because there was a drag artist in the show who eventually became one of my best friends who convinced me to do a fringe play in drag. And that's where it took off.
Wow. So much like guidance and like unexpected guidance in your life coming in, right? Where these moments where you might like feel like, I don't know if I resonate with that. But then, as you're saying, the universe sometimes screams and like really tells us what's meant to happen. And wow, I'm just curious about your relationship now with like Dionysus and with witchcraft, the spirituality. Like, how has that evolved and shifted? And, especially I'm thinking about this in the context of drag and like how drag exists as an archetype and like the roles that drag performers play in our society.
So when I started in drag, like I said, I was kind of in the not the honeymoon phase, but like the rush phase of a relationship with deity. So everywhere I looked, there was a little something for me to spot and kind of like resonate with me. And especially obviously in drag. And what was great was that it was both things that were being presented to me and me going, wow, like I never thought of that before. And then also there was meaning making in the
Yeah.
same environment where I was looking at things and going, you know what, this doesn't need to mean anything, but I'm going to make it mean something. And so that's where a lot of kind of that relationship with gender that I was exploring because, at that point, even though I was in my mid 20s, I still was like, I always tell people that I'm a bit of a prude. I'm not a judgy prude. I'm not trying to stop anyone from having fun. It's just I am incredibly vanilla. I identified as asexual for a very long time. Gender, sex, all of that stuff was kind of like, well, I'm going to keep you at arm's length.
Hmm.
But when you're worshiping Dionysus, so much of his mythology is built up in gender and sexuality. And so I finally let myself kind of get into that exploratory space. And so as a drag artist, when you're looking at these things and you're really starting to think like, okay, well, what does it mean to be a man? I'm using air quotes in drag. And what does it mean to be representing kind of a feminine archetype? I never say that I'm trying to be a woman in drag because anyone who has seen my drag knows that I'm not one of those soft buttery queens. I always consider myself to be a cartoon woman.
Hmm.
Drag for me is always it's been a celebration of gender, but also like an exploration of gender and a deconstruction of it. So like when I portray femininity, it's kind of like it's absurd, but also saying like how wonderfully absurd it is, but also how unnecessarily absurd it is. Like that's where drag really sits for me. And
Yeah.
I discovered all of that in that moment where I was exploring gender on stage, but then also in my real life. And that's when I came out as uh, gender fluid, agender male. And it really gave me a lot of time and reason to reflect on all of those things. So all of that started to happen. That was my religious life, but then my witchcraft has always been part of my spirituality. And so again, I was kind of like meaning making where every show became a ritual. Every time I was on stage, it became a prayer. Like that's kind of where I was sitting. And now I've been doing drag for 10 years. It's my full-time job. And as anyone will tell you, never ever monetize your hobbies. I don't listen to my own advice, obviously, but in that
Yeah.
space, like it's kind of taken some of the sparkle out. I won't lie, but actually, just recently, I kind of realized it. I don't know if it was being on Drag Race. I was on season 5 of Canada's Drag Race, and I don't know if it was kind of coming up to that level of drag and realizing like my career has hit a new high level. what am I getting out of it? Let's reflect. And I started to realize, like, oh, you know what? It was different in the beginning. And I'm trying my hardest now to bring that back in, bring that meaning
Mm,
making back in, that magic. So that's kind of where
yeah.
I'm sitting at right now. It's an interesting space to feel almost like I'm going back to the beginning.
I'm really, curious. This was actually something I've been thinking a lot about in like learning about you and your practice and how you do really represent that Dionysian, like underground, alternative, creative person. And I think about how drag exists in so many different ways. And, I remember listening to the Missing Witches podcast episode you were on where you talked a little bit about like the sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and how they represent to me like a very like underground community that's very much about creating safe space, bringing people together, activism, organizing. And, then you kind of come into the world of RuPaul's Drag Race. And that I feel like to me represents like it is an umbrella, but it also does represent a very specific kind of drag queen or person. And I'm just interested to hear like how you've navigated that coming more from like an underground or from someone who's trying to resist or like create other types of forms in the space, how you then like meet up and how those exist together.
So, as you mentioned, like I am a sister of Perpetual Indulgence. I am one of the founding members of the Montreal chapter. It's a group that I don't work with as frequently anymore, just because drag on stage has taken up a lot of my kind of my free time, I guess I'll say. And the Montreal Sisters, for those of you that don't know, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, they are a group of activist, non-religious nuns. I always say that they are the sisters for those who have no sisters. They are the nuns for those who have none. And every chapter of the sisters has a slightly different flavor. And the Montreal chapter, they are very politically active. They're a little bit more active in the kink scene as well. The
Hmm.
members that make up the space decide where the sisters are going to be going, which is kind of awesome. That's part of the freedom of the sisters, is that they're out there doing queer drag for the community. So they reflect the community in that way. And so, but the Montreal chapter is not made up of, I'll say it's not made up of superstars in the sense that they are not on stage. Like a lot of them are like super shy and they're great
Right.
one on one, but they don't put on shows. And, so I kind of like branched off and did my own thing, which is why in the end they ended up sainting Uma Gahd me, because they were like, you're still out there. We see you out there doing the work the same way that you would have done it if you did it with us, next to you. You haven't stopped doing the work. So I always have such a lovely relationship with them where we're always kind of like in the same spaces, doing the same thing, but differently. We're on different roads to the same place. And I love that.
Yeah.
And originally, actually, I started doing drag with the sisters before I really started doing drag as a drag queen. And just knowing that the sisters are a politically engaged form of drag. All drag in its core is political, but it's how people engage with that politics that really makes the difference. Because
Yeah.
not everybody is making political drag, even if drag is politicized. Whereas the sisters are intentionally making political drag. And so that's kind of where I came into drag. I had no interest in doing drag. This is a recurring theme in my life where like I have no interest in doing something, and then like I said, the universe just kind of like bops me on the nose with a fact, and it's just like, nope, you're wrong. So I had no intention of doing drag, and then when I saw the sisters, I was like, this is a great way for me to build community through theater and spirituality. I was already the president of the Montreal Pagan Resource Center at that point, and I had worked in one of our local witchcraft shops. And so this just kind of seemed like a great way to extend that community. So that's where my drag came from, was out of the village. It was underground. It was weird and gender fucky. And then when I started doing my own drag as Uma, I wanted to maintain that. I wasn't really welcome in my local drag scene for a very long time. I was too political. I was too like PC for them. They thought I couldn't have fun. I didn't know how to take a joke. And so I really built up my career outside of the village. I made my own community. So even though
Mm,
Uma doesn't necessarily always look like a weirdo, deep down inside, that's who she is. Like she is She is the auntie that's like, you know, when you go to like a family reunion and you're the non-binary kid with blue hair and everybody
Yeah.
else is looking at you like, I just don't get that one. And then you got that one aunt that shows up and she's got like the perfect bob and she's always
Yeah.
wearing like silk slacks and big rings. And she's like, I don't understand it, but I'm so happy for you. That's Uma. So even though
It
I don't always look the
radiates.
weirdest, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that like love and inclusion and support really radiates from Uma when you perform in her character. And as someone who grew up really being impacted by the sisters and also by like underground queer and trans culture, it always warms my heart when I see like an artistic, creative weirdo come into RuPaul's Drag Race. And I do feel a little protective just because I see those worlds as like they're very much in relationship, but they can also be very different. Like the values, the aesthetics, like they can really have different priorities, right? And so I'm always curious to see how people navigate that dynamic, right? Knowing that you're entering into someone else's like sphere who sees drag maybe in a bit of a different way, even though, as we know, RuPaul does have a lot of connections to the underground and understands these nuances. But I definitely am curious if you have anything to say about that.
I think that Drag Race, and I mean, like, if we're talking about the American franchise, with RuPaul, yes, absolutely came from the underground, and we owe her so much in terms of drag artistry and the mainstreaming of drag. But she herself has even said that she used to be a little club kid weirdo who was schlepping her demo tapes from her backpack, taking 2-hour bus rides from one end of the city to the other to try to get anything to happen, and it wasn't working. So she eventually just looked around and said, fine, they don't want what I'm giving. I'm going to give them what they want. So like I'm not going to say she's a sellout. That's not what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
she recognizes that sometimes the path that will get you where you want to go is not the path you want to take. And so I think that that's kind of where Drag Race comes in, where they often are looking at a very mainstreamed kind of drag, and she wants people to know that getting where you say you want to go sometimes requires a different approach. And I don't necessarily always agree. I think that there is a way to get to where you're going. But on Canada's Drag Race, I did at some points kind of feel like the judges just didn't get it. And
Yeah.
they weren't necessarily picking up what I was putting down. But the thing is that no one has ever really always immediately picked up what I was putting down. People don't know what to make of Uma because she's an old lady, because she's funny, but she's also a weirdo. And like,
Yeah.
I'm not here for the orgy, but I'm here to make sure that, everyone has lube and a bottle of water, so people don't always know what to make of Uma. And so I've been doing that my entire career, even when it just comes to my makeup and the color of my wigs, because, like I have a clown face. I wear gray wigs. I didn't have resources to do what I wanted right from the beginning. And so I've been fighting my way through that, figuring everything out, looking like a crazy person on stage all the time. So I'm used to it. So when I got to the show, I went in and I said, I already have a career of 10 years behind me. This is my full-time job. I
Yeah.
have made top 5 list of drag artists in my city year after year after year. I know that no matter what these judges say, I know that what I'm doing is right for me. I know that it's right for my people. So when I went on the show, and I told them this is not me trying to like downplay the importance of the show, but I told them, I said, I have
Hmm.
my career. This is
Yeah.
going to be a very fabulous, important line on my resume of all of the things that I'm able to accomplish as an artist because I am a great artist. And so, and they loved it when I said that. When I told them that, they were like, that's really smart of you to put things in context. And that's what I tried to do the whole time I was there. So when I went out there and they didn't get what I was doing, I said, you know what? Maybe you don't, but the people who need to see someone like me are going to see me now, and I'm going to stick to my authenticity. That's always so important to me because I know that there's someone who needs to see me. And so I'm less concerned with winning and more concerned with showing people what art can look like. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be two things. It can be 9 things. And I'm going to be that 10th thing.
Right. Yeah, coming in as an ostrich, right? Or like really bringing in that like makeup that is really going against what a lot of the other queens are doing, right? And I'm curious, if you would like to share a little bit about Uma and like were you also like kind of bopped in over the head with Uma as a character, or like was that something that you felt more like organically emerged in your own performance work?
So again, God, this is the conversation I'm having with you where I realize like I really am just like so contrary to like the world. I'm just such a contrarian without realizing it. But when I started in drag, there was one face. There was one kind of drag. Everybody wanted to be like a skinny blonde Britney Spears with like snatched makeup, and that's all anybody in drag wanted to do. And I had no interest in doing it. And so when I started in drag, I actually started in a play in the Montreal Fringe Festival. So we wrote a play called Laureen, Queen of the Tundra, and it was all about Canadian politics, gender, and drag. And it was kind of like so it was almost kind of like a Saturday Night Live. This hour has 22 minutes for us Canadians, all about our prime minister's wife, who everyone thought was secretly a lesbian. And we had all kinds of really crazy political messages in there. And so my drag mother, who was Frankenfurter in the production of Rocky Horror that I did, she told me, she said, "I'm going to get you in this play," and I said, "I don't want to do it. It's in drag." And she said, "It doesn't matter. It's a play. You're building a character. You're not being a drag queen. Like you're not trying to be Britney Spears. You're going to be acting. So make a character and put her in the play. And then you're going to do it for 11 nights, and then you'll never have to do it again." And I was like, "Okay, that I can do that because it's makeup. I love makeup. It's costume. I love costume. It's people giving me attention, and I love that." So I said, "Let's do it." And then it's been 10 years and I still haven't stopped. But when I went in, it really was like, I'm going to go in with a character. And so I tried to think of all of the women in my life that made me feel inspired and also made me feel safe, that made me feel welcome. So like that's why, my sense of humor comes from my mom. My gap in my that I paint on in my drag is my dad's mom. The tiny little comma eyebrows, that's my mom's mom. My perfume is my mom's friend. And then all of these like red-headed women of comedy are the people that like built my sense of humor as well. So like Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett, Sherry Lewis, and the voice and the face that I do, like my makeup, is inspired by an actress named Edie McClurg.
Oh my gosh, I love Edie.
You're one of the first people that I've ever said that to, and they know who she is. So
Yeah,
she
she's
is
like
kind of like a
she
character.
embodies that like welcoming, loving energy. I feel so much.
Well, because she's like a character actress. She's often playing at like a Midwestern mom. So either the most welcoming or the least welcoming. Like in
Yes.
Elvira,
Yes.
as Chastity Pariah, awful woman. As
Yes.
the flight attendant on Trains, Planes, and Automobile, nasty woman. But it was the accent, because even when she was being nasty, there was still something so charming about her. So that's why
Yeah.
Uma also talks like this. She has a little bit of a Midwestern kind of vaguely weird accent. So that's kind of where that came from, was Edie McClurg and the mom on Bobby's World.
I'm curious about the decision to like bring in all these people that made you feel safe and loved, and was that really like an intentional act that you were doing for yourselves? Was it like you wanting to create that space? Like I'm curious about that decision to like synthesize all these people into Uma.
Oh, it absolutely was a conscious decision to bring these women into my character because, like I said, there was one kind of drag that I knew. I come from the nation's capital, which is Ottawa. But Ottawa is a it's a small town in many, 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 many ways. There's a lot of great things about it, but it's comparatively a small town for queer people, especially because it's a town of politicians. So like it's not a nightlife city. It's the arts, but it's like government funded arts. So it's a strange place to grow up. And the drag that I was exposed to there was a couple of phenomenal performers, but a lot of them were just, unfortunately, just bitchy gay men that were bullied in high school and then started doing drag so that they could be bitchy and bully people in a nightclub. Like, I know it wasn't all of them, but there was enough of them that it like turned me off of drag. I didn't want anything to do with it. And then that's why when I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that that is not what I'm about. So I
Yeah.
said, I'm going to make sure that I make sure that everyone feels welcome. Because when I used to go to the club, the drag queens made me feel little and like sexualized at the same time. And like I didn't feel good being there. And so
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to be the opposite. And so I want Uma to be a hug. So all of these women that I really was like, this is who I'm going at, like this is who I want to be. It was specifically in reaction to some of the not so great drag experiences that I had as a young queer person. I had some really fabulous ones, of course, but there was still I had a chip on my shoulder. And some of that was internalized queer phobia, femme phobia. Some of it was my own work that I had to do, which again was really great when I started working with Dionysus. Like there's a lot of that in there. Like that's a lot of uncovering and breaking down
Right.
and emptying out and rebuilding. And thankfully, I got to do it because it gave me the opportunity to be the drag queen that I wanted to see in the world, but also to
Yeah.
realize that I wasn't the only one that was doing that. It opened my eyes to a lot of different styles of drag. And in essence, that means that it opened my eyes to my community. So I'm really happy that I got to do that.
Wow, there's so much in what you just shared that I resonate with. I think, especially as someone who is non binary myself, like I felt so rejected growing up in the like cis gay male community and really only found that feeling of safety and security in like trans spaces or in like lesbian spaces or like non cis gay male spaces. And I think that's like what to me like excites me about people who one like play with gender but also that are pushing up against like what are some of these either stereotypes or ways that we like pass on trauma in our communities. And I don't think it's talked enough about that there are a lot of people who don't feel safe in certain queer spaces or gay spaces because of these dynamics where either it's hypersexualization or it's bullying, right? Just making fun of people, not accepting people. And so there's something so profound and powerful about you using drag as like a spell casting form of magic where you're really creating something, forging something, right? And it really ties back into what you were sharing earlier around making meaning, right? Creating something with what you have. And to me, that is so, so much a part of spirituality and magic. And I'm curious just to hear anything you have to say about what I just shared.
I think that one of my pet peeves as a witch is the sentiment that like all you need is intention. Just because I am one of those people that I love my tchotchkes, I love my gugus, I love my herbs and my pictures and my potions and all that stuff. So there's a little part of me that always gets a little irritated when I hear all you need is intention. I think that intention is the most important part of the whole package, but most of the time I don't agree with the idea of like intention is everything. But I also think that intention on its own can make the spell work. And so that's why like when I created my drag and even as I continue evolving it, I think that the intention absolutely is like a big part of that. Like going out into the world and manifesting the world that you want, the world that you need. I do think that no, I don't need to be walking around with, drag pockets full of, vervain and mint. I could,
Right.
but I don't have to. But like the intention is there that when I walk out there, and I think it's because maybe it's the wig and the lashes that are kind of like replacing the herbs. To me, there's like, yes, the intention is great, but if you want the impact of the spell work, it does take a little bit extra. So getting the glitter out there is a kind of important part of it. And I think that that's one of the things where it's like, yes, if you even if you're doing something that you think is mundane, if you give it meaning and you give it the extra, giving it meaning is great on the inside, but if you want it to affect the world around you, I do think that you have to externalize the spellcraft a little bit. And that's why
Yeah.
when you're in drag, you've got all the glitter, it's for the world around you, and then that's how you're manifesting. So the intention is super important, and then going out there and doing it is the big thing.
Yeah, yeah, bringing all your, tchotchkes together as you're naming and working with them, creating meaning with them, and then sharing them, right? Like bringing them out into the world. And yeah, I'm wondering, with you naming, there's like two things that I'm feeling here where one you named earlier about around how you're wanting to return back to that like original spark, the thing that really made you excited about drag and performing and being in queer community. And also I'm thinking about where we're at politically at this moment with drag being seen as something dangerous or drag being seen as something scary by some people. Like, I'm wondering if there's any way that you're sensing Uma wanting to shift or your own practice wanting to shift. And do you have a sense of maybe where things are wanting to evolve or change?
I think that a lot of the changes that I'm feeling for myself, they're kind of personal things. It's going to sound, this is going to sound so consumerist and so, you know, like it's gonna sound maybe surface level and cheap, but I think it's still important. When I started in witchcraft, I was in the basement, and as much as I said I come from the nation's capital, Ottawa, that's just the closest city that anyone's ever heard of that I come
Right.
from. I come from a tiny village of 250 people outside of Ottawa.
Wow.
And so I didn't necessarily have resources. And this was also like the late 90s, early 2000s when I started. And like I didn't have resources for witchcraft to get fancy resins and expensive tools and all this other stuff. And so I made do with what I had for a very long time. And I think that there's a power in that. There's an ingenuity that becomes like that gets trained, and there's uh finding value in the things that you have that becomes really important. And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. But now as somebody that's like I'm close to 40 now. I've been doing witchcraft for like almost 30 years, I want to say. And so at this point, I'm kind of sitting here thinking, I am a grown adult with my own grown adult money. I can go out and buy the resin that I never got to use. I can do the fancy things that I convinced myself I didn't need. And I can see what the hubbub is about. And the thing is that I'm not necessarily doing it because I think that that's going to make things better. But I do think that one, novelty is important. As someone who has been suspected of committing an ADHD, novelty is important for me. And so, getting those things is going to be fun, but also it's like you put yourself to a test by trying something a different way. So like I've never done it the way that it's written in the books before because I was doing it my
Right.
way. Well, what's going to happen when I do it their way? I'm going to get to test myself and see what I feel about it, how I think about it, what results come out of it. So I'm kind of in that space where I'm starting over because I want to try all the things I didn't get to try when I started. And so that's where I'm at, like on a very personal level. So I don't know if
Yeah.
it's necessarily going to show through in my art quite as much, but that's the whole thing, right? Is that I'm saying that I'm retrying. So who knows? Maybe if I start doing this in my personal, private space, once I step out on stage, maybe it is going to make things a little different. Maybe it is going to transform things again. So I'm starting on the inside so that way when I put on the glitter and I go out there and I manifest, that it might manifest something totally unexpected. And so I think that
Yeah.
that's part of what you were saying. And then in regards to kind of how drag is seen in the world right now, I mean, I am a preschool teacher. I'm a qualified early childhood educator. So I've been doing drag full time now for 6 years, I think.
Hmm.
But before that, I was a preschool teacher. So like drag story time is just my day job in a wig.
Right.
To me, it's just natural. Like a lot of drag artists, when they do drag story time, they pick stories like storybooks that are related to like queer themes. And when I do drag story time, I'm reading my favorite stories from when I was a kid and then my favorite stories that I found as a teacher. And so they're not related to queer themes necessarily at all because I know that literacy is super important. And I know that literacy is a great way of teaching children all kinds of things. So yes, some of it is queer content, kind of like diversity of family and knowing who you are, loving yourself, gender, all these things can be part of it. But I also love reading I Was So Mad by Mercer Mayer because kids need to learn how to express being angry.
Right. Yeah.
So like my drag has always been political in several different ways. And right now just the fact that it is what it is in a time that it is, that eats up a lot of that time. And so I think that I am kind of like a conservative's worst nightmare, but also like in my head, I should be like everything you want from a drag artist. Like if you're gonna say like, well, look at all these terrible things that queer people do, and then you look at me and go, oh, but this one's actually like a preschool teacher who doesn't do sexy drag,
Right.
who doesn't drink, like I drink a little bit now. I'm no longer straight edge, but like it's not my life. I only drink when I'm at
Yeah.
work. But like you should
Right. And
like
you're
me.
interested in literacy, right? Like you're like, the kids need to learn how to read. They need to know how to share their emotions.
Like I should be the shining example of like why everything can be okay. But that's why it's kind of like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because existing sometimes is the best thing we can do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I absolutely am on the mic saying the big things, the important things, the things that need to be said loudly. And sometimes I'm just doing my job. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's okay. Like I try to keep it balanced so that I don't exhaust myself because as somebody that is in the public eye, as somebody that is a part of a lot of people's queer community experience, I want to keep doing this. And so I do want to make sure that I'm giving what everyone needs and I'm getting what I need. So it's a little bit of that balance that I'm focusing on right now. I'm trying to remain focused on celebrating my community instead of getting mixed up in the nonsense of people who already decided they don't like us.
Right.
It happens,
Yeah.
but
There.
I try not to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much already for us to do in our own communities and so many people that need support. And, I'm just like really sitting with how you are sharing that, going back to what you said earlier around giving yourself what you didn't have when you were younger, right? Like being able to reconnect with these practices, but with maybe more resources or with trying things out in maybe a more conventional way, right? Like that there is something about like giving yourself something that maybe was missing or wasn't there when you were younger. And I really do feel like that is also what is so powerful about showing people different options, different ways that we can show up in the world. And I know that so many queer and trans people feel the need to like build other forms of family and community. And you brought that word community in, and I know that you belong to the house of God. And like, I'm curious about you sharing a little bit about that community and like what maybe chosen family or what that has meant for you to be a part of a house.
So the House of God we were originally called the House of Laureen because of the first play that we did. And as members kind of like came and went, we decided that like because it was basically there's three people that were still kind of in the group steadily, and it was me and my husband, who is also my drag sister, Uma Gahd, and
Yeah.
then another drag sister, Anaconda La Sabrosa. And we kind of thought, you know what? Like House of Lorraine, one being named after a conservative government, like a conservative prime minister's wife, was like a weird choice to begin with. Nobody gets it, and then when they get it, they look at us like, "What?" So we thought, let's rebrand. Let's launch the House of God. It just makes more sense on a business level because Selma, my drag sister, is the mistress of business.
Yeah.
So like when she says something about business, you listen. So that's kind of where that is. Like we see ourselves as a drag family. It's kind of like loose, and I've got three drag sons. None of them have my drag name, but they're all part of the house. But they're not necessarily in the plays that we do because we consider ourselves a theater troupe first.
Hmm. Yeah.
And but that's kind of like that's the beauty of the queer family is that it is fluid and it is about everyone being able to provide what they can when you need what you need. Like there's somebody who's going to be there to help you. There's somebody that's going to be able to support you. It's not the same person all the time because that's the thing about like I'm going to be real honest. The thing about kind of like conventional biological families that I find crazy is that we expect people to like complete us. Like my husband, my wife, you are my better half, my other half, my kids who rely on me, who are then going to take care of me in my old age. And like it's kind of this obligation almost. And what if someone's just not good at something? What do you do?
Right.
Whereas when you have these queer families, it's a lot more ephemeral and you get to serve you get to serve community and people that you care about in ways that you can do it best. And that's kind of like where you find the people that need you and that you need. Like it's a reciprocal thing. And it's, like I said, it's more ephemeral. And that's what I think the beauty of it is. And in a drag family, like House of God, there are people I don't really speak to my drag mother that much anymore. She moved away, and there were some hard times in our family, but I still know deep down that that's part of my queer family. She is still somebody that I will always clap for. She's always somebody that I'm going to want the best for. So
Yeah.
like it's again, it's kind of like I think as queer people who don't always get accepted by our families, we end up being we end up recontextualizing, and instead of recreating family dynamics, we recontextualize what it means to be a family. And that's why we see things so differently and we experience it so differently, and it's like, I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm like, feeling such a like sigh of relief hearing you share about this. Like it really makes me think of I've like coined this term in my head, queer privilege, where queer people, because of this ephemerality, this fluidity, we have an ability to like have everything fall apart. Like our sense of self, our like our lives, and then we can rebuild and come back together and like make it happen again, right? And like I think to me, like that is something that really makes queer and trans people so resilient and strong and adaptable. And I also do feel like that is a place where a lot of straight people could learn from the queer and trans community that like fluidity, mutability are really important, and they allow us to exist beyond the things that might be really rigid. And with you naming like family roles, and I think about like gender or even like family dynamics, like things that people might feel like really stuck in. There's a way that like, you could understand that there are other ways that we can show up in the world and that we could be fluid and we can show different aspects of ourselves, or we could also organize families that only last a night, right? Like that there are things that are possible beyond what we've been told is possible. So I'm just like so happy to hear you share about this in this way, because it is so powerful to know that that exists, especially if you're someone who feels alone or feels like you don't have, family around you. Just know that that is out there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, it's not necessarily something I kind of fell into my queer family. But sometimes it is a little bit of work to like find it and make it and keep it. Like I said,
Yeah.
relationships are not easy. Like, I mean, my drag sister Selma is my husband, and that's a lot in work. Like it's four people that's four people living in our apartment. It takes up a lot of room because it's me and my husband and Uma and her sister. Like that's a lot of us,
Right.
but we
Yes.
make it work. And like I had a falling out with my drag mother, but I still see her and everything that I learned from her as a blessing. I've got a drag sister that I see frequently, and then I've got a drag son that I speak to. He moved away, and so we spoke to each other once or twice a year. It was, we didn't stress about it because we saw the value in what we brought each other, but it wasn't necessarily something that we were relying on. But it's out there, and it'll be in a weird place. It'll be in a place that you're sitting there thinking like, no, I can't do this. Again, here's that message again. You're
Right.
thinking, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go hang out there. I'm not going to take that class. I'm not going to go to that club. I'm not going to, I don't know, take that art course. And then boom, that's where it is. Like
Yeah.
you might fall into it. You might have to work for it. You might have to fight for it, but it's all possible.
I'd love to hear you say a little bit more around this, what you're bringing in, this kind of moment that you might notice resistance in yourself, right? And yet there might also be a desire. There might also be something you're wanting, but you notice that something's stopping you, right? But then you maybe make that decision and you put in that hard work. I'm curious if there's anything else you want to share about that, like the magic you've seen that happens in those moments.
I am by nature lazy and also anxious. They work out really, really well together because, like, anxiety makes me feel like I don't want to try anything. So I do nothing. And then the lazy part of me is like, this is great. I love doing nothing. So I love the safety that anxiety and laziness provides for me. I'm really lucky in that my husband is incredibly adventurous. He'll try anything. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. Like he lives by that. In
Yeah.
my head, the worst thing that can happen is they say no and I die. Like, that's how it feels. So I'm really lucky because I have him there. Like, when I went full time in drag, that wasn't my decision, that was his.
Wow.
I was working full time at a daycare. I was waking up at 6:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30 every morning to do my shifts. And then I would come home. I would shower in the morning to get ready for work. I would go to work all day, come home, take a shower, shave, go to a gig, stay till 1:30, 2 o'clock, come home, shower for a third time,
Oh my
go to bed for four
gosh.
hours, and then wake up. And he was like, you're going to kill yourself. You can't keep doing this. So he decided that I was going to go full time. And I trusted him. And
Yeah.
that's kind of that's kind of what it is that, like, again, when I was, when people were talking to me about Dionysus, and I thought, like, that's crazy, no way. At some point you have to look out into the void, into the universe, into the possibilities, and trust. It's really
Yeah.
hard, but sometimes I think it's one of those things where, in when it comes to spirituality and religion, like, if we're not talking about your pocketbook, if we're not talking about your rent, your groceries, if we're just talking about things that might make you happy, you have to trust. Because in the end, yeah, you might feel embarrassed. Yeah, you might meet someone that you don't like. You might meet someone that you do like, and then it might not work out. Like, there's a million possibilities in the world, but you have to trust yourself and your ability to, like, withstand, because you're gonna survive. You're like,
Yeah.
unless something goes terribly, terribly, terribly wrong, you're going to survive. You might not feel great about it, but you'll survive. So you have to have some of that trust. And that is one of the things that's taken me the longest to learn. But again, like I said, like, all of these opportunities in my life where I was like, nah, 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 it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. It doesn't even have to scare you. You can just kind of feel like, nah, no, take the chance. Trust that you'll survive it. Trust that you'll learn something out of it. Like, make meaning out of it. If you're ready to make meaning out of something that you feel comfortable in, make meaning out of something that makes you uncomfortable. Because that's the only way that you're going to keep the inspiration, the spark, the movement, the motivation. That's where it all comes from. And
Yeah.
so, as much as you want to say no, trust that sometimes you do need to say no. Of course, everyone needs to have limits. Everybody needs to
Of
do what's,
course.
but search, keep your eye out for the opportunities where, like, trusting might not be easy, but it will be valuable. And then
Right.
that's where you do it little bit by little bit, and then you trust more and more and more. And as you trust more, the world opens up to you. And that's how you can keep succeeding. Of course, there's always privileges that are involved, and there's money, and there's sexism, and there's politics, and there's a million things. But keeping your eye out for where you can trust and where you can try is a great way to succeed. It's a great way to
Yeah.
fail, but it's a great way to succeed.
Yeah, and failure is such a huge part of success, right? And I feel like as an artist, I've really learned that iteration is so powerful. Having those moments where you fall down, but you like pick yourself back up and you learn that one thing. And so you try that different thing again. And just knowing that sometimes you are being led somewhere, even if it does feel like you don't know where you're going. There are things that might emerge. And I think that trust is so big, especially when you do feel that like yearning, that desire, or that like little part of you that's like, I kind of want that, but I'm not sure if that's right. As you said, if it will make you happy, move in that direction.
I also think that, again, this is like the recurring theme in my life, I'm realizing. When something turns you off, explore that. Because I always say this in drag as well, where, like, when drag artists ask me, like, what's your number one tip for a new drag artist? For me, it's always go big. Try the crazy makeup, try the clown face, try the weird wig, try the conceptual number, try it.
Yeah.
Because it's always easier to go big and then pull back than it is to find your comfort in the little and then be confronted with having to go big. You'll never feel 100%, like, when it comes to makeup, just as an illustrative kind of
Hmm.
tool. If you are a butter soft little twink and you never ever let yourself try big hair and like crazy lashes, you're gonna feel like a clown when you have to do it, or when you finally decide, like, oh, I'm going to do it, you're going to feel ridiculous. But if you go for it from the start and you let yourself do something silly, you might hate it, but you'll know why. And you're going to look
Yeah.
at it and you're going to go, this is not what I wanted. This is not the way I wanted to look. This is not the way I wanted to present myself. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to, like, I'm going to know what it is that I don't want to do. So I'll try something else. And you might end up being a buttersoft twink for the rest of your life. But you also might just be somebody who is somewhere in the middle. But so when
Yeah.
something turns you off, explore why. Try it and say, that's why I don't like that. There we go.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like a way to really like expand your window of tolerance, right? So that you can like feel like have more possibilities maybe than when you would first start. So I love that advice. And I could really feel that resonating with many other disciplines too, to really make yourself go to that limit so that way you can have something to come back from, right? Instead of like feeling the big hurdle that comes up when you might want to try to push yourself to go out there again, especially when you get comfortable within certain practices. Yeah. And, I think one question I have for you that I'm just curious about, are you into the tarot, being a witch? Like, is that part of your like witch practice?
So, yes, but I'm not good at it. I love the tarot as a concept and as a tool, but I've never been able to memorize it. 78 cards is a lot of meaning
It
to
is.
remember. And then there's some of these bitches out here who want me to remember reversals. Are you crazy?
Well, the
So
reason I bring it up, I was just curious if you have a card that you connect with or that you resonate with, or that you might feel like you're maybe living in this phase of your life right now. Like, is there a card that has any meaning for you right now?
it's kind of funny that you asked this because I actually have a drag play that I wrote, and then I perform with my husband Selma, who you just saw walk by in the background, by the way. Um,
Yeah. Hi, Selma.
but yeah, it's a play called Why God Why, and it's we read tarot for the audience and then did drag numbers based on the cards.
Oh,
And
wow.
I I like it was such a fabulous production that we got to do. But in the end, like I'm one of those people I can never remember like the most important things when you put me on the spot. But I will say this actually, it's a good metaphor. I am
Hmm.
less a tarot card and more of an oracle card. I
Yeah.
don't have the space to remember all of those memories, like all of the meanings and the everything, but I can look at something and give it meaning. So maybe I'm not a tarot card. Maybe I'm an oracle card from like a really colorful deck with like beautiful shapes and that means something incredibly important for the creator that made it and then is like meaning is found in it by people who get to experience the art. I'm more of an oracle card.
I love that so much. Yeah. And I think that fits in so well with you being someone that creates meaning, forges meaning out of experiences, out of like moments in your life. And to me, that's like a very valid, very ancient also way of doing divination is like receiving omens or having things that happen and creating a meaning out of them. And so I really want to like honor that type of witch practice as well, knowing that not everyone has the capacity to remember all the tarot cards, right? Yeah, well, I want to thank you so much for being on, this podcast and would love for you to share how people can get to know you more, connect with your work more, because I really want them to see your work. And also if you have anything coming up that you want to share in the next couple of months.
So if you want to follow me on any of the socials, you can look up Uma God. So it's UMAGAHD. The HD goes together like holy deity, like high definition, like hot dog.
Yes.
So I'm on all the socials under that name, except on Twitter, where my account was banned for no reason. And you can find me at House of God there. If you look up God, GAHD, me, Selma, and our production company are the only ones that come up. So you can
Amazing.
find me on there. So if you're old, I'm on Facebook. If you're a millennial, I am on Instagram. If you're Gen Z, I'm on TikTok. And if you're crazy, yes, I'm still on Twitter.
Wonderful. Well,
And
is there
oh,
anything,
actually,
yeah, you want to like share that you might be like doing or that you'd like folks to connect with?
yeah. So I don't know when this is going to be coming out, but I am going to be in Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Fringe in August.
Ah, so
I'm
exciting.
doing, yeah, I'm doing my one woman play. It's called Are You There, Margaret? It's me, God. And
Yes.
it's the story of Uma's life, all about fame, family, feminism, and failed marriages. So if you're in Edinburgh or the those abouts, then come down and see the show. I'm there in the Fringe. I think from the second to the last week. Otherwise, I'm in Montreal. And if there's anybody out there who wants to book a drag queen, if you need a birthday clown made of couch cushions, I am available for birthdays, for Comic Cons, for book signings, for divorces. Like, I don't care. Yeah, I have a
Yes.
weekly brunch that I do in Montreal in case anyone here is listening there and you want to come check it out. Check the socials. I'll tell you all about it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Uma Gahd. It's such a gift to connect with you, and I'm so grateful to Amy from Missing Witches for bringing us together. And just want to say what a treasure you are, and so grateful that you've shared some time and space to be on Your Art is a Spell. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your time at the Comic Con that you're at, and yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. God bless.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a wonderful conversation that I just had with Uma Gahd. I'm really struck by a few of the things that she shared that I want to just highlight and reiterate. One of them being that sometimes you might have an idea in your head as to how your life is going to unfold, but then all of a sudden you're met with sign after sign after sign telling you to go in another direction. Of course, we all have free will and autonomy and could decide to ignore the signs and be like, whatever. I know what's best. And there can also be moments where we take a risk, put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation, and see what it's like to try out what the world has been ramming down our throats. I've definitely had this happen in my own life, moments where I have felt like I know what my art career is supposed to look like, or I know how I'm supposed to show up in the world. And then you have people who see something else in you, who are reflecting back something else. And it is so exciting sometimes to take it on and see what happens when you're like, maybe I am a musician, maybe I am a writer, maybe I am a performer, and then see what happens. You might love it, you might hate it, and you will learn something from it. Uma also really wanted to stress that it is so important for us to bring together our intention with some sort of practice, with some sort of action. That is a big part of magic work and witchcraft, is to, yes, have an intention and then to put that intention into action, to really work and cultivate that fire energy, which is about directing energy and putting it into our art practice. And that can be anything from, as she said several times, getting the glitter out and putting glitter on your face or in your costumes, or it could be drawing something, creating a song, any way that you could really bring that intention into a physicalized or non-physical form is a way of really working with that energy and creating something from it. I really want to thank Uma for all the ways she shows up in our communities and for the intention that she places behind her artistry of wanting to create inclusive, loving, safe spaces for queer and trans people to come to, knowing that not all queer and trans spaces feel safe for others, especially if you are gender nonconforming, if you don't fit into certain societal norms around body types or abilities. There's so many reasons why we need people like Uma championing for safety, for inclusion, for love in these spaces. So if you liked this conversation, if you resonated with it, I want to invite you to share this with a friend. I'm envisioning us weaving webs as we have these conversations, bringing people together in many different ways. And I've been really in awe of the people that have been connecting with this podcast. We just passed 2,000 downloads the other day. We have been heard across almost 40 countries. And that's not even counting the number of plays that these episodes have gotten on YouTube as well. And so I am wanting to say thank you to everyone for sharing these episodes or telling your friends about this, and also want to invite you to get onto my newsletter by going to yourartisaspell.com. You can connect with me, and I'm going to be sharing some exciting updates coming soon. soon. So you don't want to miss that. So definitely want to invite you again to get on my newsletter. That is the best way to stay in touch with me. I'm going to be having more ways for us to collaborate and participate together. But with all that said, I want to remind you that your art is a spell and it will change your life and the world around us. Bye.